We all love video cards. Their seductive curves of the propellers, their alluring shine, the warmth of the tubes, the coveted warmth that they give with all the fibers of their textilite soul. But among other things, we also love the stories of video cards, how they appeared, when, and what happened to them afterwards. Today's video is, if I may say so, a comparison of the GTX 1080 and its follower in the affairs of the RTX 2080 graphics. Of course, we will compare their performance, what 1080 can do in 2023, and how far it will lag behind 2080. But first, a little bit about the cards. I bought the GTX 1080 on eBay for $120. This is its market price today. The gigabyte version is 3 cooler, but quite compact, only 2 slots in thickness. In tests it warmed up to 75 degrees on average under overclocking at 1900 MHz. Memory was also overclocked at 550 MHz, which added a little to performance. RTX 2080 I ordered a new one from Aliexpress for $300. The current price will be at the link in the description. The option came surprisingly new, and even with a seal, the vendor is like Yeshua, but at the same time MSI. And now a little history. What were the interesting cards and what were the chips at the time of release? The nvidia Pascal generation began to enter the market in May 2016, represented by the GTX 1080 and GTX 1070. Later, in the next couple of months, the rest of the 10th line cards were released. The performance gain compared to Maxwell averaged 40%. In general, the line turned out to be extremely successful. For its price tag, the generation offered a good leap in productivity and energy efficiency, so the GTX 1070, which has 2 GB more memory, has become a powerful and energy-efficient replacement for the GTX 980, and the already legendary GTX 1060 has replaced the GTX 980. In subsequent years, this popular favorite has consistently occupied the first place in the rating of video cards among Steam users. Our heroine of the review, GTX 1080, appeared on the market in February 2017. According to the established tradition of nvidia, the gaming flagship grew out of Titan X, or rather, it is the twin brother of Titan, demoted from a professional accelerator to a gaming one. In general, the demotion did not affect the characteristics in any way, they are almost identical. nvidia did not trim the cores and transistors of the 1080, so that the difference against the background of a simple 1080 was most noticeable. Compared to the Titan X, one of the 12 RAM controllers, 8 ROPs, and 1 L2 cache section were disabled. Because of this, the bus has narrowed from 384 to 352 bits. Well, the memory has become not 12, but 11 GB, and not anyhow, but the GDDR5X standard. But the bus frequency of the 1080 has risen from 10,000 to 11,000 megabits per second. And the chip frequency has also become a handful of megahertz higher. In total, we had a GP102 chip manufactured according to the norms of 16 nanometers FinFET, numbering 12 billion transistors and 3,584 CUDA cores. 11 GB GDDR5X memory with a 352-bit bus, and the latest Pascal architecture. By the way, about her, becoming an improvement of everything that was laid down in Maxwell. So, color compression algorithms were improved. If Maxwell could only encode in a ratio of 2:1, then Pascal learned to encode 4:1, or a combined 8:1 algorithm. This did not affect the picture in any way, but it gave an increase in memory bandwidth by as much as 20%. Modification of geometry processing blocks, simultaneous multi-projection. If earlier green cards could simultaneously project the geometry of the scene onto perpendicular planes, which eventually formed a cube, now it is possible to display up to 16 projections, made up in an arbitrary way. It was necessary in the increasingly popular VR, as well as for the fast operation of many monitor configurations, namely, the correct display of scenes in screens standing at a certain angle. Previously, without SMP, the image on several monitors was not distorted, only if they were lined up in one straight line. Expanding capabilities in DirectX 12, async compute, dynamic allocation of GPU resources between graphics and computing load. Previously this was only the case with AMD adapters. Tiled rendering, a kind of rendering that came to us from mobile GPUs, splits the scene into sections, tiles, which are sequentially rendered into a single image. The desktop uses instant rendering of the entire image, but Pascal is able to use the advantages of the mobile version, thereby saving the PSP of the video card. There were also new ports, the HDMI 2.0B interface and the DisplayPort 1.4. The maximum resolution was now 8K at 60 Hz. A card with a price tag of $649 came out. Its release was accompanied by a reduction in prices for GTX 1070 and GTX 1080. Those at the start cost $379/449 and $599/699, Standard and Founders Edition, and after the release of the flagship were priced at $349 and $399, as well as $499 and $549, respectively. That is, the output of the GTX 1080 was a holiday for everyone. Well, except for the lucky ones who bought Pascal at the start at full price. Time goes by, everything changes, and here comes September 2018. A new gaming top, RTX 2080 from the Turing family appears on the market. Yes, now the whole line is called RTX, not GTX. Not counting, of course, the late GTX 1660 series adapters. Yes, the digital name jumped. If earlier everything was quite logical, GTX 780, 980, 1080, now the digital name seems to have jumped as much as 10 generations ahead. However, we suspect this is a marketing ploy to show how far the new solution was from all previously released video cards. However, no one cared about the name of the line. Everyone was shocked by the price of the flagship, $999. $350 more expensive than the previous GTX 1080 What did the novelty offer for such money? RTX 2080 was built on a TU102 chip. And this means 12 nanometers FinFET, 18.6 billion transistors, 4,352 CUDA cores, and some 68 ray tracing cores and 544 tensor cores. There was the same amount of memory, 11 gigabytes, but already GDDR6 memory. The bus is also 352 bits. And what's new in the architecture, RT Core? They are needed to render a new type of lighting in games. Tensor kernels. Improved tensor cores that came to Turing with the professional Volta. They are needed to work with neural networks that will be needed, for example, for calculating DLSS and DLAA, or noise reduction in scenes, as well as for machine learning. Extended DirectX 12 support, improved asynchronous computing and shader processing. Now the performance in this API is in no way inferior to that of AMD Radeon. A couple of new graphics technologies have also appeared. Mesh shading is a type of rendering of scenes with complex geometry. Where possible, the feature imperceptibly simplifies the geometry, thereby unloading the video card, saving resources and increasing productivity to the detriment of inconspicuous objects. Variable rate shading is a feature that allows you to simplify the rendering of samples of 4x4 pixels out of focus of the scene. Such areas are often masked in games by blur effects. For example, in racing simulators. This feature requires implementation by developers, but allows you to save video memory and improve performance. Texture space shading, shader data values are stored in memory in a special texture space, from where they can then be called again. In simple terms, when rendering an image in VR, where the scene is duplicated for each eye, both images exchange data for rendering, which leads to increased productivity. DLSS. A new type of smoothing that works based on a neural network. DLSS can also reconstruct a high-quality image from a native smaller one, which increases productivity and improves the picture. Ray tracing. A new type of lighting construction in games, in which the behavior of light rays is simulated in real time. Of the advantages, this is a reliable picture with live dynamic lighting, where light and shading behave as they would behave in real life. In addition, developers no longer need to manually prescribe each ray. Ray tracing does everything on its own. -1, the new graphic feature is incredibly voracious. Bounding volume hierarchy. A tool designed to speed up ray tracing. It involves splitting the scene into a structure of hierarchically connected blocks, which include different geometric primitives. That is, the feature itself will calculate and test everything, speeding up the simulation of the behavior of the rays. Multi-view rendering is a development of simultaneous multi-projection from Pascal. This method increases the number of displayed projections from 16 to 32, and also increases the viewing angle in VR to 200 degrees. Foveated rendering is a feature to reduce the quality of rendering in VR and improve performance. NVENC-H.265 is now able to encode in 8K at 30 frames. Other encoding types are now able to stream in 4K without significant CPU load. Image output ports. DisplayPort 1.48 simplified the output of an image in 8K 60 Hz. Previously, Pascal needed several wires for such a resolution. In addition, Turing can output an image to 2 such monitors, as well as with HDR, and there is also a new virtual link port. It also supports 8K SLI. SLI is slowly becoming a thing of the past, but it is still available in Turing, though only for 2080 and 2080 Ti. You can combine two video cards. So, for a bunch of 2080, 8K 60Hz, 5K 75Hz, or 4K 144Hz are available. The 2080 additionally supports 8K surround. Something has been added to GeForce experience. So, now you can take high-quality screenshots with ray tracing in it Ansel RTX. Moreover, the study of the rays will be better than in the game itself. And thanks to neural networks through Ansel Upres, it will be possible to take beautiful screenshots in high resolution, quality and elaboration. And so, on release, the flagship cost $999. No holiday this time, everyone pays the same. Equally many innovations have to be paid for: a larger chip, new cores, new memory. Huang may be an innovator, but he's definitely not a philanthropist. However, how much more powerful was the RTX 2080 than its predecessor? Now we'll see. The games were tested in 1440p resolution. Where there is tracing in DLSS, they are disabled for obvious reasons. Apex Legends. Esports settings, the game is dynamic, and as we can see, according to the frame rate, the spread is the same. Well, dynamic, at 1080 FPS is excellent. It usually stays around 150 frames per second, sometimes decreasing, sometimes increasing. At 2080 FPS is expected to be higher, around 200 frames per second, with the same swing. In general, it's clear that Turing dragged, but absolutely playable on both cards. Assassin Valhalla, very high settings. That's why we love single projects, so it's for their ability to test in identical scenes. The difference between the accelerators is noticeable. 1080 is a bit complicated in this project, but nevertheless the card can withstand 60 frames per second. 2080 is simpler in this sense, 70 to 80 frames per second without any significant drawdowns. Some conclusions are already beginning to suggest themselves. What will be interesting next? Atomic Heart. Hi, the Soviet gaming industry always pleases, if not with a picture, then with good optimization. And perfect technical condition means sometimes more than next-gen graphics, and apparently, the GTX 1080 is made taking into account the strictest standards. The card holds a stable 60 frames per second, sometimes giving up to 70 frames. RTX 2080 goes even further, giving out 80 to 90 frames per second, getting close to 100 frames. Pretty good. Battlefield 2042. Ultra settings, in general, everything is clear enough. Both cards were dragged. However, there is a nuance. 1080 gives us 70 frames per second, and 2080 90 to 100 frames per second. It is playable in both cases, especially since we have ultras that are not needed in multiplayer. Control. Ultra settings, here is the first project that lost 1080 below 60 frames per second. Alas, Pascal keeps around 45 to 50 frames per second, which is still very good for this game. In this sense, the 2080 is doing well, already giving out 70 to 80 frames per second, which, of course, is sweeter and more pleasant. In addition, the frame time at 1080 jumps a little, even if nothing terrible is observed. Cyberpunk 2077. Ultra with AMD FSR on quality. It would seem, the terrifying settings that the RTX 3090 dreamed of in nightmares, but the game has already been patched up with patches to a playable state. At 1080 you will be able to play at 35 to 40 frames per second, and at 2080 you will already be able to play at quite stable 70 frames per second. For 1440p and Ultra settings, a very good result. Days Gone. Ultra, an example, perhaps, of an ideal port of a former exclusive, fast, stable, without bugs. So, at 1080 we get 70 to 80 frames per second, and at 2080 90 to 100 frames per second. At the beginning of the test, several freezes were noticed. We will talk about this at the end of the video. Dying Light 2. High with AMD FSR quality. On both cards, the frame time is calm, and the frame rate is also not feverish. The 1080 has an average of 70 frames per second, the 2080 has 90 frames per second. Sometimes higher, but not significantly. Fortnite. Hi. After patches for cooler lighting, the window pane mercilessly bends everything that can display an image. Our two maps had a hard time landing on the map. Hello freezes. However, everything is much better on Earth. If the 1080 has 60 to 70 frames per second, then the 2080 has over 100 frames per second. However, the freezes are not released here either. We suspect it's about recording gameplay. Mafia Remake. Hi, both cards do their job brilliantly. The 1080 produces a stable 80 frames per second, and the 2080 produces 100 frames per second at all. And the frame line is even. RDR2. Ultra with AMD FSR quality. So, in the game we have about 50 frames per second at 1080t, and 70 to 80 frames per second at 2080t. It is quite tolerable, it is played both there and there without any problems. Shadow of the Tomb Raider. Ultra, another example of excellent optimization and high FPS. Top Pascal gives 90 to 100 frames per second here, and top Turing gives 120 frames per second on average. In heavier locations, there will also be more than 60 frames per second. The Last of Us Part 1. Hi, of course, we heard enough horror at the release, but as you can see, everything is not so bad anymore. The game is being repaired, and even a 6-year-old Pascal quite pulls 50 frames per second, though with drawdowns up to 40 sometimes. As for the 2080t, there are generally 80 to 90 frames per second, with drawdowns up to 70. It's probably better to wait for more patches. Well, what can I say here, summing up? GTX 1080t, originally from a serene 2017, has not lost its prowess after 6 years. The top came out extremely successful and productive, thanks to the pedigree of the princely family of Titan X, and today the card continues to keep the brand, giving out a good frame rate at ultra settings. However, 1440p will be superfluous here. The card will be best in 1080p, the FPS will be higher and generally more stable. Whether to buy it today or not is debatable, it all depends on the price and its condition. After all, there were already 2 mining fevers on the accelerator's life path, but its performance is, of course, excellent, and 11 gigabytes of memory is by no means a surplus, but a necessity. The RTX 2080Ti performed better as expected. With a fresh architecture, higher performance, and support for ray tracing and DLSS, the map may seem like a more preferable choice. That's it, that's just one thing, the card is significantly more expensive. And the performance with tracing is far from ideal. So everything here depends on the price and condition in fact, because both cards are really good. Also, freezes sometimes slipped in the tests, which was clearly visible on the frame line. As we have already mentioned, we suspect that it's all about recording gameplay. Without it, the load will be less, the FPS is more stable, and there should be fewer freezes. Respectively, also in the case of GTX 1080Ti, if possible, it is better to play DirectX 11, Pascal is more productive with it, but Turing is already good in both 11 and 12 DirectX. Well, that's probably all. Thank you for watching to the end, and if you liked the video, do not skimp on likes, comments, bells, and subscriptions. This will help us both fly into algorithms and just improve our mood. See you again at Live Games.